So we've just talked about Westport United, right?
Yeah.
And so they, you know, it very well came up with this patron
Yeah.
system. That's great. But there are so many other things that clubs need to understand and learn about because of the convergence of things that are happening in social media. You know, and so if they structure themselves properly, they can generate a lot more in terms of sponsorship and fundraising. But they've got to focus on what they currently have, what they're currently doing at the moment, and just package it in the right way.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a lack of knowledge, and it's not critical, but it's identifying people in clubs who can take control of social media platforms and put some structure on it in the first place. And yes, there are monetization initiatives where for fundraising can be generated through various initiatives that can ensure that fundraising tends to be the biggest headache for any club, whether it's at schoolboy, junior, youth, intermediate. Being able to pay our bills and pay our way is just hugely important. And if you have the right people and they're proactive about it, there are opportunities there. And social media, you know, we talk about this explosion in growth, but you know, I firmly believe that we're still in the early days of what is going to become the way clubs communicate, the way clubs fundraise. All of this is going to be done online, and having the correct strategy and realizing that there is a pathway available where not alone can you manage your fundings, your payments, your management systems, but there's also opportunities as well to ensure that if you identify sponsors, that they will get bang for their buck, but also that sponsors will realize that social media is a more than viable platform in terms of them getting the exposure that they want. Now, be that at the local level, at the provincial or national level, or indeed at an international level. Years ago, you know, advertising spend was channeled towards newsprint or magazines, and that is now a changing model where all of that advertising spend is now in a digital world, which means that social media platforms now become the vehicle for people to get their message out. And I think clubs need to recognise that A, it exists, but B, it is more than able to ensure that their finances remain in a healthy position going forward.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I was speaking to Brian there in terms of the Trojan work that was done in fundraising and developing the idea and the whole process there. You know, moving forward, you know, he spoke about, you know, young families now in the area that are going to be using the club for the next 10, 15 years. And, you know, this is something that we're at Striker Online, we're really trying to focus clubs and teams on, is that a child that comes out of an academy and into a team, once they're into a team, that's kind of like a product life cycle. And that team hopefully will stay together for as long as possible. Of course, there's ups and downs and ins and outs. But it's that product, that life cycle, that is really, really attractive to sponsors. Why? Because the predominant way that people take media, and they're not watching TV anymore. So it's mainly social media. It's mainly, you know, while they're sitting on a bus, they're just
on their phones.
They're consuming social media. They're looking at what things they're interested in, things coming up on their feed. And football is a staple diet. The sport is in the home, whether it's GAA or it's rugby or whatever. It's a staple diet. When your kids are playing, it's part of your diet. You're going to look at it everywhere. So this is a tremendous opportunity that sponsors are becoming to understand now, because sponsors want what's called UCG, which is user-generated content. And clubs are actually doing that already. There are some that are better than others, and but very few of them are actually connecting it properly to sponsors. Some of them are, but very few of them are. And this is where Striker Online is really coming in to help progressive coaches, which is always, it's mainly team based. So you have some teams, that manage to go on more trips than other teams. Why? Because they just have the coaches that are just that little bit more tech savvy, they're a little bit more commercially orientated, and they're able to harness the strength of the community. And this is really the building blocks of creating a long-term season-to-season sponsorship arrangement, which is not a cap in hand.
Yeah.
This is not cap in hand charity stuff. This is where a team can provide a real business case, a marketing opportunity that is a fraction of the cost of them doing their own marketing and getting in front of people through the mobile phone. And this becomes a real marketing opportunity for these businesses, and they have no problem paying 1, 2, 3,000 euros a year. And the future is not one sponsor per shirt, but multiple sponsors per shirt.
Yeah, like the overall scheme of things, players will have life cycles, so they're playing career, and it can go by very quickly. And clubs that really do well are clubs who have player retention. And that player retention might see them gravitate into coaching or indeed managing the club. But there are players out there who would have played for clubs who would like to make contributions. They may well be in business, they may well have platforms. And this is an opportunity that they can give something back to the clubs that gave them so much. That they might have busy lifestyles, and it mitigates against them actually having a day-to-day involvement. But by being able to give directly back into clubs where they've enjoyed some of their best sporting days is a real opportunity, and it helps to bind them to the club and provide that legacy of involvement and commitment and recognition of, I put my hand up, this is my club, I want to do something here. And social media, sponsorship is readily available for clubs, and I think we go back to it. I think if clubs have proactive people who are involved and understand how to network and how to make those connections, you end up with a much better product and a much better profile for the clubs, which makes it easier to attract those sponsors in. So once you recognise that some clubs are very progressive, and clubs who want to get involved in social media have got to recognise the building blocks that gets them to the position where they can monetize it. And having tech savvy guys, people who can navigate around social media or on digital platforms, is actually key to help them what actually translates onto the pitch at the end of the day.
Yeah, and moving on from that, Eamon, and a lot of people don't fully grasp this, right? So, a lot of clubs, like, let's say, would have, a social media following, maybe a Facebook site, an Instagram site, maybe 2 different people using them or whatever. And then maybe they have, an average 5 to 10,000 followers or whatever. But if they operate just as themselves, they're only a tenth of the size of the whole league that their team is playing in, and this is what they're missing out. Their sponsors are delighted in the fact that they're playing in a league with 10 other teams.
Yeah.
And those 10 other teams have their own sponsors and their own Facebook page, and it's about collaborating.
Yeah.
It's about competing on the pitch and collaborating often. Because if you actually look at every league, it's its own ecosystem.
Yeah. And you have that organic growth which explodes exponentially out, and more and more people latch onto it. And because it is a social media, it's a sharing platform, you get this blossoming of sharing of content, and that can only be good for sponsors. It's more bang for their bucks.
Exactly, and it's little, call them tricks, or marketing, marketing strategies where you tag, and so very quickly it's a team, let's say, sponsored by 5 or 6 local or even some national, depends what they want, but they're constantly getting tagged, and for clubs don't realize the value of those tags, because what's happening is that Smith's Pharmacy is now being tagged by the under 15s at Portmarnock, right? And they now have they've something to share.
Yeah.
They've something to share because they say, oh, do you know what I mean? And it's all, so they're always stuck for something to share. And now they have something, they have a connection to the community.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always have to be about success. this is another thing: win, lose, or draw.
Yeah, sport's a journey, and you know you have to know what defeat is to appreciate the joys of victory. And you know, sport actually makes men of boys and women of girls, and that they realise that they're in an environment where they're dependent on their teammates, that they learn how to collaborate, they look up to leaders, and they recognise what leadership is. And there are life skills that are being learned from a very young age that people might be unaware of or recognise, but in the fullness of time they recognise the benefits that they had from being part and parcel of a team set up, living in that environment, knowing that other people depend on you. And that is all part of the sports journey, regardless of code, you know, sort of regardless of sport. Sport is for enjoyment, but being able to give a profile and show and be able to showcase your abilities is also part of what today's world is all about.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even some, you know, the content can be everything, you know, like from, you know, player interviews, hearing what they think, who their favorite players, hearing what their other pastimes, you know, some players you have also do boxing, and bringing in and just giving the more meat on the bones of this kind of individual team that grows outwards and then becomes that story that people want to follow. And what happens then is that, you know, not only are they bringing in more revenue in terms of sponsorship because they're giving back to their but they're also now going on more trips, and they're bringing their girls teams and boys. They're going on these amazing trips, which are you know, trips of a lifetime, and the parents are now, because they're following it on, because they're kind of applying, let's say, a Striker Online content strategy template. They're ticking these boxes off once a month, and that's boxed off, and it's there forever. These little interviews are there forever, and they become a tapestry of their football journey, immortalising it forever.
And like, I mean, Striker Online, obviously, sort of where we are in the market, what we want to do is we want to help individual clubs, we want to help leagues and associations and help them with that journey by giving them a platform and giving them profile, and we're in a position to do that. And you know, in fairness, Alex, the wraparound ads like a world first as far as we're concerned. What we can do about enhancing content and delivering that message into games themselves is a huge advent in the world of social media.
Yeah, and just to move on before we finish here, another thing is that a lot of people, it's not just sponsorship that we're talking about. There are so many ideas within a club, and once it kind of twigs into that kind of commercial side of it. I'll give you an example. Merchandising. I mean, there are lots of systems now where you don't even have to touch a product. All you have to do is, once you have your, you know, subscription, all you have to do is use a decent system, use a good system, and like a subscription, and most of them will have an e-commerce functionality within them, and they can be tied into these fulfillment services. So once you have a decent vectorized version of your logo, a lot of clubs don't have that, and a lot of clubs have them and lose them. But we have a free service at Striker Online where we give clubs a vector. But once you have that, then you can basically join up with a fulfillment service, and they can go and they can buy a mug or they can buy a bag, and that can be, you never have to touch the product, but you can be generating money coming in. Another one that we've seen a lot of, and a good bit, is nearly every club in the country, and there's about 2,500 I think. They all have these what I call shoe boxes in the attic, you know, and in these shoe boxes are photographs, newspaper clippings, you know, and they haven't seen the light of day, you know what I mean? And they can be taken out and digitized very simply, not like through, you know, some kind of very expensive ultra. You can actually do it now. We have a system now in Striker Online where we can digitize those photographs for you, and they can become behind a paywall. So those really amazing photographs 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, that aren't on the internet, and if they're not searchable either, but they can be up there. And you never know. You just never know. If you're not in, you can't win. There could be a grandson of a great grandson of a guy that had started the club, and now he's like living in Australia. He hasn't seen a photograph like this. He's a multi-millionaire businessman, and he just goes, "This is unbelievable. Here's a check for 500 grand." I'm not saying that's going to happen. What I'm saying is, if you look at the United States, that's how they operate.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys out there sitting on content, and they say, you know, in a press, in a drawer, you know, just squirreled away in the attic, and being able to access that content, and you say digitize it, it provides a legacy, it provides a history of the club, and the more content we can get, you know, the more people can access it. And as you say, you know, like behind the paywall, there might be a small contribution, but the contribution is going back to the club as well. So it's a way of monetizing, and you know, people are sitting on all this wonderful content, newspaper cuttings, programs from yesteryear, you know, medals, whatever. There's tons of that stuff out there, and we simply want to provide that platform that they can showcase the great days of history in their clubs.
And another one, just to have three, and there's lots of these lists. Another one is, and you see it a lot during the summer, clubs that are organising blitzes or mini World Cups or whatever, and they're doing a great job. Their pitches are perfect. They send out and you can see the ones. But these type of things not only serve to provide more football for kids, but they're eaten up, and they themselves, if the clubs actually take a content strategy approach to it, they can generate significant funds from these. I mean, they can be serious profit generators for the club if they add a kind of content strategy to it. And so that's what we're in a unique position, Eamon, in that with Striker Online, not only can we, you know, help clubs to harvest that data, to harvest the content that's out there, but we can productize it, make it into something that is attractive to the sponsors. So the sponsors saying, this is good, it's good content, it's wrapped around in the storyline that you've been doing for over 40 years. Not only that, with Striker Online and our reach, we're able to deliver the eyeballs, deliver the exposure that guarantees these sponsors will pay season after season.
Yeah, and these mini leagues and mini World Cups, for many of the parents and kids, it's their first engagement, it's their first experience with these clubs who are going out, probably trying to identify a bit of talent that they can recruit into their underage structures going forward. But these World Cup blitzes are often the starting point in a journey that for some will lead all the way up to full international level. For others, it'll always be a social game, but this is where the journey for so many of them will start.
Yeah, well, let's look forward to a big season 23-24, and it's going to be good fun.
Ready to rock.